Welcome to The Criminologist, the podcast dedicated to educating and entertaining our listeners. We bring you subject matter experts from around the world and share the latest and greatest evidence-based practices and interventions to help individuals desist from a life of crime and delinquency. This podcast avoids stereotypes and biases in favor of the lived experiences of those we can best learn from. Now, please welcome the host of The Criminologist, Joseph Arvidsson.
Hello, and welcome to episode 184 of The Criminologist Podcast. Happy to have you all with us today. Friends, I cannot tell a lie. I am still buzzing from my recent travels, both to Barcelona to once again teach at the International Training School on Core Correctional Skills, and of course, my amazing trip to Australia to meet even more kindred spirits, eager to learn and grow and challenge themselves. I know many of you are members of APPA, the American Probation and Parole Association, and can likely relate to this feeling. It is not uncommon to hear comments from practitioners as to the feeling they get when returning from an event composed of like-minded professionals, and that sense that it really does recharge one's batteries, so to speak, and give them a spark of resiliency. So today, I would like to channel some of that energy and enthusiasm and to challenge some of you who may be looking to level up your supervision game. Now, it is no secret that we often talk about the topic of desistance from crime on this podcast. And although I have mentioned him in the past, I need to point out that my early indoctrination, if you will, into desistance from crime was largely based on the work and subsequent mentoring of Dr. Ralph Sarin from the University of Ottawa. In particular, Dr. Sarin introduced me to and eventually trained me both in the use of and how to train other staff members around his assessment tools designed to measure a client's progress towards desistance from crime. And the crown jewel of these tools is the DRAOR. DRAOR stands for Dynamic Risk Assessment for Offender Reentry, DRAOR, the DRAOR. And of course, Ralph and his team, which I will mention here shortly, also developed other tools. They developed the SDAC 21, which is the prison and jail version of the DRAOR, which was designed more for use in a community corrections setting. And then they also created what is known as the client change scale, which also measured a lot of these same correlates. As a quick backstory to my evolution around these tools, I must note that a fellow devotee of Dr. Sarin is Dr. Caleb Lloyd. Caleb was a former graduate student of Ralph Sarin who, post-graduation, decided to plant a flag, if you will, in the Southern Hemisphere and now currently resides in Australia and works at the Swinburne University of Technology. Fast forward to my recent trip to Sydney, and who indeed was also presenting at the PCOA conference, none other than Dr. Caleb Lloyd. So we got a great chance to connect and chat about these tools. And of course, I got to see the awesome presentation that Caleb did with his team from the Swinburne University of Technology. It was mind-blowing. For those of you who may be intrigued to learn more about these tools and the work of Caleb Lloyd, I have left Caleb's Swinburne University of Technology link in the episode description of this podcast. I encourage you to check out some of his publications around not only the DRAOR, but of course, the larger themes of desistance from crime. And of course, we have been chatting up our TIDES program approach as well. And obviously, there's a natural link between these two topics. For just as we need to understand the interplay between the Risk-Need-Responsivity framework and the desistance approaches, we need to understand the relationship and the role of R&R-based measurements, such as the LSCMI, the LSIR, the COMPASS, or the Ohio Risk Assessment System, and the interplay with tools such as the DRAOR, the STAC-21, and the Client Change Scale. Now, to be clear, the following is intended to be a broad overview of the DRAOR. Just as an overview of the aforementioned R&R related risk measurements would include a review of the central 8 criminogenic needs, this overview will include larger thematic elements of the DRAOR. In our journey to understand the complexities of criminal behavior, the crux lies in comprehending the factors that influence an individual's progression through life, whether towards or away from crime. This exploration takes us into the intricate world of the DRAOR, which stands as an acronym for Dynamic Risk Assessment for Offender Reentry, a system meticulously designed to answer questions crucial for community corrections practitioners. So as mentioned, let's take a look at the subscales, if you will, of the DRAOR tool. These subscales are broken down into 3 buckets, if you will. We have the stable subscale, the acute subscale, and the protective subscale. Let's take a brief look at each one of these buckets. A reflection on longevity, the stable subscale brings to the forefront longer-term factors that rehabilitation programs might have targeted. These factors encapsulate elements from an individual's past, their criminal orientation, that they carry with them as baggage, if you will. It's not about pointing out what's wrong, but instead focusing on understanding if interventions have facilitated genuine change. Is the change deep-rooted? How has the client's trajectory shifted in the community? Now, operating within the immediacy of the present, the acute subscale is the pulse check, if you will. It examines current situations and feelings like anger, negative mood, or conflicts in interpersonal relationships. Are there storm clouds of potential trouble brewing on the horizon? The primary concern here is to gauge imminent reoffending risk. Is the bucket, representing their emotional and psychological capacity, about to overflow? Now let's look at the protective subscale. This isn't about risk, it's about hope. It's about asking the pivotal questions. What would a future look like for this person if they were leading a crime-free life 5 years down the line? It paints a picture of strengths, of protective factors, and contemplates how these strengths can be channeled towards a crime-free trajectory. From being responsive to advice, to nurturing a pro-social identity, and ensuring the presence of supportive social networks. It all pivots on fostering protective mechanisms. Sculpting the above, let's delve deeper into the intricacies of these subscales and their item categories. The criminal orientation items shed light on an individual's past experience and choices. The immediate situation speaks volumes of their current state of mind. then there are hooks, if you will, for future success that can pave the way for a transformed life. Navigating this journey, one is inevitably introduced to the age crime curve. This curve offers a lens through which one can dissect the chronology of crime in an individual's life. It begins with identifying the risk factors that initiate individuals into a life of crime. For instance, risk factors such as a young age, antisocial attitudes, and substance misuse can be pivotal in an early criminal trajectory. As we progress along the curve, we encounter moments where individuals might opt for change, but desire alone isn't enough. It requires a robust support system. And this is where factors like hope, agency, redemption sequences play a monumental role. It's not just about wanting to change. It's about believing in the possibility of transformation. Ralph Sarin and Caleb Lloyd have done a lot of great work and used a lot of great imagery to capture the juxtaposition, if you will, between risk factors and those desistance correlates. On the one hand, they've identified markers like young age and an antisocial history, while on the other hand, they've identified anchors, if you will, such as older age and stable employment, guiding one towards desistance from crime. Central to all of this is the commitment to change. This commitment is influenced by both internal and external factors. Internally, it's about an individual's self-efficacy, their beliefs, and how they perceive themselves. Externally, it revolves around the support they receive, be it through correctional interventions, proactive supervision, or positive relationships. However, it's also vital to acknowledge the pitfalls. Let's examine just a couple of items within that stable bucket, if you will. Sense of entitlement, as well as attachment with others. A high sense of entitlement, characterized by narcissistic and grandiose beliefs, can be a stumbling block. This self-centered attitude often comes at the expense of others, leading individuals down a perilous path. Furthermore, poor attachment with others can result in social disconnection, making the climb towards rehabilitation even steeper. Now, in the acute items, let's look at elements like anger or hostility. These can propel individuals towards justifying criminal actions. Negative moods, on the other hand, internally distress the individual, leading to a breakdown in coping mechanisms. Current problems in interpersonal relationships can act as triggers, pushing one closer to the edge. But it's not all bleak. Don't forget about our bucket of protective factors. Now, these protective items shed light on the brighter side. Being responsive to advice includes a willingness to change, to embrace a new path. Another item in this subscale, cultivating a pro-social identity. This can serve as an antidote, if you will, to criminal pursuits. Moreover, the perception of the cost and benefits of staying crime-free can be instrumental in shaping decisions. The value of social support cannot be overstated. Those meaningful relationships, those anchors of stability, can make all the difference. And when these relationships exert a positive influence, ensuring social control, the journey towards a crime-free life seems not just possible, but probable. Okay, time for some fun. Let's look at these two approaches, these two assessment approaches, through a case study. And let's first look at how a high-risk client may be viewed via the R&R lens. We'll look at those central 8 criminogenic needs, ranging from, of course, criminal history, education, employment, family marital, leisure rec, etc., etc. And then we'll look at what an assessment of this same high-risk client might look through when viewed through the DRAOR lens. So, without any further ado, let's take a look at our new client, Anakin Skywalker, aka Darth Vader. The Risk-Need-Responsivity model plays a critical role in the effective rehabilitation and management of clients. Darth Vader, a figure of immense power and influence, poses a complex case for evaluation. Here's a deep dive into Vader's criminogenic domains, also known as the central 8 subscales. Criminal history. Risk, very high. Analysis. Anakin's descent into the dark side started with acts of vengeance, notably against the Tusken Raiders for his mother's death. As Darth Vader, he committed countless atrocities, from aiding in the destruction of the Jedi Order to enforcing the tyrannical rule of the Galactic Empire. Education and employment. Risk level, moderate. Anakin was initially a slave, which could have influenced his perception of power dynamics. Later, as a Jedi and subsequently as Vader, he held possessions of immense power, but his alignment shifted from peacekeeping to authoritarian control. Family marital. Risk status, high. Anakin's early life was marked by separation from his mother and the loss of his wife, Padme Amidala, events that deeply scarred him. His relationships with his children were tainted by his dark alignment, further complicating familial ties. Leisure rec. Risk status, moderate. Analysis. Anakin's leisure activities were initially oriented around a piloting and tinkering with machinery. However, as Vader, there was a stark lack of positive recreational activities, with most of the time dedicated to the dark pursuits of the Empire. Companions. Risk status, very high. Analysis. Influenced significantly by Emperor Palpatine, Vader's companions were predominantly Sith or Empire-aligned individuals, reinforcing his dark actions and beliefs. Alcohol-drug problem. Risk status, low. Analysis. While there's no direct evidence of substance abuse, the reliance on his life-supporting armor and its potential effects on his cognitive functions might be seen as a physical dependency, if not strictly a substance one. Pro-criminal attitudes and orientations. Risk status, very high. Analysis. As Vader, his belief in the New Order and its methods, including tyranny and force, was unwavering. He saw these measures as necessary for peace and stability, reflecting a strong pro-criminal orientation. Antisocial pattern. Risk status, very high. Analysis. Anakin's transformation into Vader was marked by an increase in impulsivity, aggression, and a lack of remorse for his actions. This antisocial behavior, reinforced by the dark side of the Force and his mentors, became deeply ingrained in his persona. Now let's take a look at some responsivity considerations. Given the depth and complexity of Vader's criminogenic factors, an individualized approach centered on cognitive behavioral interventions would be recommended. He would benefit from interventions addressing trauma, loss, and power dynamics. It would also be crucial to reconnect him with the positive elements of his past, notably his time as Anakin Skywalker and his connections with his children, to reinforce pro-social's behavior. In summary, Darth Vader, with his myriad of deeply embedded risk factors spanning all 8 criminogenic subscales, would indeed be classified as a high-risk client. His rehabilitation would require multifaceted, intense, and long-term interventions with a focus on cognitive restructuring and reestablishing pro-social connections. Thank you. Thank you very much. I should point out at this point that the DRAOR assessment tool is intended to work in conjunction with your existing, more longitudinal risk needs tools. Whereas, for example, the LSIR, the LSCMI are intended to be administered annually, the DRAOR, as a subsequent tool, is intended to be utilized for every substantial office visit you have with that client. So now, let's continue on this journey of make-believe and take a look at what the supervision would be like and the assessment would be like of the same client, Darth Vader, this time looking at his situation and his case through the DRAOR. Darth Vader, formerly known as Anakin Skywalker, was a Jedi Knight who fell to the dark side and became a Sith Lord. As Vader, he committed numerous atrocities, serving Emperor Palpatine in a reign of terror across the galaxy. After years of darkness, he was redeemed by his son, Luke Skywalker. Following this redemption, and in a universe where Vader survives, he's introduced to the DRAOR assessment to support his ongoing rehabilitation. Again, recall the 3 buckets of scales, if you will, in the DRAOR: the stable subscale, the acute subscale, and the protective factor subscale. Let's start first with those items in the stable subscale. Criminal orientation. Anakin's transformation into Vader was marked by betrayal, rage, and a quest for power. His actions as Darth Vader were driven by a belief in the New Order's superiority, justifying atrocities as necessary for galactic peace and order. The pain of losing his wife, Padme, and feeling betrayed by the Jedi Order only deepened his criminal orientation. Social influences. Anakin grew up as a slave on Tatooine, which shaped his early worldviews. As Darth Vader, his main association was with the Emperor and other dark side adherents, reinforcing his beliefs and actions. Sense of entitlement. Vader's exceptional skills as a pilot and a Jedi gave him a sense of invincibility. His belief that he was the chosen one, and that led to a heightened sense of entitlement, feeling that his actions, no matter how dark, were for the greater good. Attachment with others. Anakin's deep attachments, especially to Padme and his mentor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, were significant. However, as Vader, he severed these bonds, leading to a lack of remorse for his actions. His inability to healthy process grief and loss further fueled his descent. Let's look at the next bucket of items in the acute subscale, beginning with anger and hostility. Anakin's transformation into Vader was driven by intense anger. Anger towards the Jedi Knights, anger at the perceived betrayals, and at his own impotence in saving Padme. This anger was a driving force behind many of his actions as Darth Vader. Next, negative mood. Feelings of sadness, loss, and guilt over his actions, like the massacre of the Jedi younglings, plagued Vader. Initially, he was in a constant state of turmoil, leading to impulsivity and a breakdown in coping mechanisms. Finally, current problems in interpersonal relationships. As Darth Vader, his relationship with his children, especially Luke Skywalker, was complex. He oscillated between wanting to draw Luke to the dark side and moments of paternal instinct. Finally, let's take a look at the items in that protective subscale bucket. Beginning with being responsive to advice. Initially resistant to any form of guidance opposing his beliefs, his final moments with Luke showed a burgeoning openness to change. What about the next item, prosocial identity? While deeply buried, the remnant of Anakin Skywalker within Darth Vader still existed. This was evident in his interactions with Luke and his final act of redeeming himself by saving his son and destroying the Emperor. Next, social support. Luke's unwavering belief in the good within him provided the essential social support Vader needed. This bond with his son played a crucial role in his eventual redemption. Finally, positive future orientation. As his end neared, glimpses of Vader's desire for a better future, especially for his children, began to emerge. The hope of reuniting with his loved ones and ensuring the galaxy's safety hints at his underlying protective mechanisms. In conclusion, while Darth Vader's descent into the dark side was marked by a combination of personal tragedies, social influences, and internal turmoil, the protective factors offered by his son Luke and the residual goodness within him provided a pathway for rehabilitation. The DRAOR assessment in this fictional scenario serves to understand the complex interplay of factors that shaped one of the galaxy's most formidable figures. Hopefully, that struck just the right balance between education and entertainment. The point was to introduce you all and really get you thinking about the next generation of assessment tools. As we've talked about so often, there's a great symbiotic relationship between the Risk-Need-Responsivity framework and the emerging desistance approaches. And to that end, we also feel we really need to level up our assessment game to keep pace with all these amazing discoveries and innovations as to the human change process. And speaking of innovations, what an excellent segue back to our TIDES program model. TIDES, of course, being shorthand for trauma-informed desistance. And if we take a look at those 4 pillars of change within TIDES, self-regulation, resiliency, identity, and social support, we could put a nice bow on the Darth Vader case plan, if you will. It would include such things as building his resiliency, engage Vader in resilience building exercises, emphasizing coping strategies, adaptability, and overcoming adversity. Identity reinforcement, workshops on identity formation and evolution, emphasizing Vader's journey from Anakin to Darth Vader and the potential return to Anakin. This would help in identity reclamation and reinforcement. Enhancing his social support. Create an environment where Vader is surrounded by individuals who promote pro-social behaviors, encouraging him to establish deeper connections and foster trust. Incorporating these interventions focusing on self-regulation, social support, identity, and resilience, the case plan offers a comprehensive approach tailored to Darth Vader's specific needs as highlighted by the DRAOR assessment. The objective is to foster genuine transformation by targeting core issues while building on protective factors. And of course, the TIDES model is an excellent adjunct for those of you already using the DRAOR, VSDAC 21, or the Klein Change Scale developed by Sarin and Lloyd. Hey, a quick reminder here in closing. We will be bringing you some awesome guests in the future. We've not walked away from that. We also have some big changes coming to the show post episode 200, so likely after the first of the year. So please stay tuned for those changes. We will be back next week with a fresh episode. In the meantime, you may contact the show or reach out to us through our website, the Paragon Group, LLC.com, for training or presentations as to core correctional skills, the TIDES model, or of course, the topic of desistance from crime. If you have questions or comments as to this podcast, feel free to contact the show via our email at thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. That's thecriminologistpodcast@gmail.com. Remember to follow us through our Facebook and Instagram pages at The Criminologist Podcast. New fun images are being added all the time to those feeds. You don't want to miss out. The Criminologist Media Group is also on X. Give us a follow at Crim Media Group. That's CRIM Media Group. You may also connect with me, Joseph Arvidsson, on LinkedIn and follow both the Criminologist Podcast and the Paragon Group on our LinkedIn pages. Hey, lastly, if you've not already done so, check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Criminologist, for additional content as to the themes of this podcast. And if you believe in what we're doing on the show, if you're part of the movement, please spread the word, tell a friend or a coworker or a colleague about us. Ask them to subscribe to the podcast, and of course, do so yourself if you've not already done so. And always remember, folks, there's no them, there's only us. Anakin's descent into the dark side started with acts of vengeance, notably against social influences. Anakin grew up as a slave on The
Criminologist Podcast is a production of the Paragon Group, LLC. For speaking engagements, interviews, program design, or training opportunities, please visit us at theparagongroup.llc.com. If you enjoyed the show, you can find more content and videos on our YouTube channel, The Criminologist. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Both the Criminologist Podcast and the Criminologist channel are brought to you by the Criminologist Media Group. Be sure to give us a 5-star review, and thanks for listening.